October 26, 1984, Jeanette Scott threw a party at her fourth-floor apartment where she had just moved in 2 days prior with her 4-year-old daughter Sandra and her 3-year-old daughter Charlene. Scott's party went into the early morning. Many of the 7 guests drank heavily, and by one estimate, they smoked 14 packs of cigarettes. At 5 a.m., 22-year-old Michael Richer, a guest at the party, saw flames coming from the back stairway. Kathy Monet, who lived on the south side of the 3rd floor, smelled smoke and at the same time, and then saw flames on her back porch. North Adams Fire Department received the call around 5:34 a.m. The fire was now raging, visible from the firehouse a half-mile away. 3 hours later, rescue workers found the bodies of Sandra and Charlene and 16-year-old Brent, who had attended Scott's party and said they have gone to sleep sometime after 4 p.m. Scott, Jay, and Sherry Tatro, who were buddy of Tatro's cousin, were found injured as they jumped from the 4th floor window while trying to escape the fire. 2 of the survivors would later say they did not save Scott's daughters in part because of the concerns the daughter were badly burnt and they were dropped or fell out of the window. Trooper Robert Scott, an arson investigator with the Massachusetts State Police, led the investigation. Scott arrived at the scene at 8 a.m. and began examining the building's charred remains and interviewing the people that lived in the building and attended Scott's party. He would later testify that at 1:30 p.m. he had concluded that the fire was intentionally set. That by 8 p.m. he had a prime suspect. He interviewed Simon, the building's owner, who had told him there was no electricity on the back porches. Bernard Marsh, who lived with his wife and children in the apartment below Jeanette Scott, told Trooper Scott that he had been wakened at 2 a.m. on October 27th by a woman yelling, "Get the F out of here." He said he left the apartment about 4 a.m. to go deer hunting in Vermont, and while waiting for his ride saw 2 young men get into a maroon Chevy Nova. One was his buddy Tatro, the other were Tatro's close friend, 17-year-old William Bill Cascone. Marsh said the 2 young men drove off and returned about 10 minutes later and walked towards the back of the building. Trooper Richard Smith, who assisted Scott, interviewed Monet. She said that after she saw the flames, she rose her boyfriend, Christopher Morehouse, and the Marshes, and they made her way down the stairs. On the 2nd floor, Monet said a skinny kid with a mustache appeared to come out of Simon's apartment and run past her out of the building. The trooper interviewed the injured people at the North Adams Regional Hospital. Summers said he had arrived at the party with Cascone and the 2 Tatros, who were distantly related to Jeanette Scott. At some point, Summers said he heard Jeanette Scott tell Cascone to leave. Summers said that Cascone drove him to the hospital and jumped out of the building, and that Cascone was very drunk. Richard told the troopers that the young man with Sumner and buddy Tatro argued with Jeanette Scott after she accused him of hitting her. The man then left and came back for beer that he brought to the party. Richard said that as the young man left around 4:45 a.m., he said something like, "You're going to get yours." Sherry Tatro and Dealey gave similar statements to the troopers about the argument between Cascone and Jeanette Scott, although neither said they remembered any specific threats. About 3 p.m. October 27th, Trooper Scott interviewed Buddy Tatro's parents. Carolyn Tatro said that Cascone had called the house about 11 a.m. and asked whether Buddy was there. After she said he wasn't, Cascone told her that they had been together at the party in North Adams and there had been a fire. She said Cascone told her he had an argument with Jeanette Scott. Lynn Tatro, Buddy's sister, told the troopers that Cascone had appeared to make a joke about not knowing the whereabouts of her brother. The trooper interviewed Cascone about 6:30 p.m. on October 27th at his home in Charlemont, about 15 miles east of North Adams. He said Jeanette Scott became mad at him for no reason. He said he left the party just before 1 a.m., returned around 2 a.m., and then left for good around 4 a.m. after Scott started in on him. Cascone said he fell asleep in the Nova and woke up around 5 a.m. to urinate. He said he heard a crackling noise and saw the back of the building was on fire. He said he tried to kick the front door, later broke the window, and then ran across the street to the bar and told someone to call 911. By the time he returned, Cascone said Summer was hanging out of the window and others were on the ground hurt. He took Summer to the hospital and then returned waiting for Buddy Tatro. Under questioning by Smith, Cascone said he only had a little bit to drink at the party. He also reported that he had argued with Jeanette Scott but didn't know what he did to make her that she threw him out twice. He also said he had gotten into the building after breaking a window and altered several tenants about the fire. Trooper Scott asked Cascone if he set the fire. Cascone responded, according to Scott's report, "What? Do you think I'm that sick?" The trooper then gave Cascone and Miranda warnings and asked him to take a polygraph test, which was administered on October 31st. The test was halted after Cascone started to cough and hyperventilate. The trooper who administered the test would later tell Scott that he believed Cascone had a cold and had tried to sabotage the test after initial running through showed deception. On October 30th, the police received a call from B.J. Roche, a reporter of the newspaper in the nearby Greenfield. She said that the man named Charles Chandler had told her Cascone said his brother Michael set the fire in North Adams using gasoline. According to Chandler, the brothers were upset and been thrown out of the party. A week later, on November 5th, Chandler contacted Smith and said that the friends knew something about the fire. According to Chandler, Bill Cascone has confessed to lighting some cardboard boxes on fire. In another interview with the state police on November 13, 1984, Chandler said, "I would love to be a witness to what the friends said because I don't like any of the Cascones." At the time, the Cascones and Chandlers were embroiled in a series of criminal cases and it started nearly a year earlier, on December 18, 1983, when the fire destroyed Chandler's home in the town of Heath. A month later, Chandler was charged on 2 accounts of rape involving a girl who was 14 years old. Michael Cascone was a witness in the case, and Chandler was later indicted on the charges that he can prevent Michael and another man from testifying. In March, Chandler was indicted for the insurance fraud in connection to the house fire. Bill Cascone told the police that Chandler had offered another man $1,000 to burn down the house. The man refused. Charles Chandler, with an accused on rape charges on November 29, 1984. Michael Cascone had testified for the state. Harvey Chandler testified for his son. He said he had by no chance run into the victim at a coffee shop and the girl told him that nothing happened. On September 12, 1985, Scott submitted a report about the North Adams fire. Scott testified that Cascone's statements to the police appeared to be contradictory. In one statement, Cascone said he smoked a few cigarettes before falling asleep in Tatro's car. In another, Cascone said he had not smoked any materials. According to Scott's reports, Cascone first said he woke up to urinate and then saw the fire. But when interviewed in Okinawa, according to the Scott, Cascone said he awakened by an explosion. In addition, Scott testified, Cascone said he ran up the back stairs to warn Scott and the other residents to get out of the building. Scott said that this account conflicted with what he said considered to be the fire starting point, which would have blocked the route that Cascone described. Cascone testified that he had never threatened anyone at Scott's party or set the fire. He said he and Scott had argued over a beer he wanted to take with him, but that he wasn't angry when he left the party. In his testimony, Cascone attempted to address Trooper Scott's testimony about his statements. He testified that he was sleeping in Tatro's car when he was woken up by a loud noise and needed to urinate. That was when he first saw the fire. He testified that he had no matches when he left the apartment and lit a cigarette in the car from the one he was smoking at the time. Cascone testified that Scott's confusion about his actions in the moment after he said he saw the first fire were either based on old misunderstandings or police not asking the right questions. In his closing argument, before you find Mr. Cascone guilty of a crime, you have to find that there has been a crime. Cohen said, "Where's the evidence?" Prosecutor Lee Deanne Folany told jurors that Cascone was drunk and angry and he lied about when he left the party to give himself time to fall asleep. He said that the evidence supported convictions of second-degree murder based on the death occurring during the commission of another felony rather than the first-degree murder, which required premeditation. Premeditation. The jury convicted Cascone of larceny and 3 accounts of second-degree murder on June 15, 1987. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murder convictions and 18 to 20 years in prison for the arson conviction. All the sentences were to be served concurrently. Cascone appealed his conviction, arguing, among other things, that there was insufficient evidence to support a conviction, and that Floriny has improperly questioned the sincerity of Cascone's courtroom demeanor, which she said was mellow. The Massachusetts Court of Appeals affirmed the conviction on February 26, 1990. Cascone was eligible for parole, 15 years in prison. 3 times he declined to participate in the process, in part because he was unwilling to admit guilt. Although the motion said there is no clear scientific evidence to support the conclusion that the fire was set, new evidence pointed at Nassif and Belanger as the persons who might have been involved. Belanger's sister said in an affidavit in 2021 that her brother and Janet Scott had dated but broken up about a week before the fire. She said Belanger was mad that Scott was already seeing someone new. The sister said, when George drank, he became impulsively violent and would lash out at anyone or anything for no reason. I think that George was capable of setting the State Street fire. Separately, Stanley had signed an affidavit in 2019 and he set the fire with Belanger because Nassif had lived in the building and was angry that the landlord was kicking him out. In addition, Nassif had a conviction of larceny at the same time period at the North Adams fire. The motion also said that Cohen had provided insufficient representation. In addition, the motion said Cohen told jurors in his opening statements that he would hear from the witness who described a young man running from the fire who was much slighter than Cascone and wearing different clothing. But those witnesses never testified. After the motion was filed, Cascone's attorney moved separately for the stay of his sentence and his release from prison, in filing that the attorney at Cascone's was a model prisoner with strong roots of the community, and the state's initial response in the motion for a new trial has been found deficiencies in Scott's investigation that call into question of reliability of the evidence presented in the trial, in turn, the overall integrity of his conviction. The state dismissed Cascone's charges on June 27, 2023. Applying to the current science to the evidence that exists today results in both an unknown origin and an unknown cause for the fire, the state said. It noted that the building was demolished, preventing any re-examination. This means that the Commonwealth cannot state any degree of certainty that the fire had been intentionally set. In the statement released by his attorneys, Cascone said, "It was a long time coming and a cause for celebration. I am getting used to the free world again and enjoying spending time with my family and being outside in nature."